All right, hands together is what they say. Yeah. Thank you all for joining us today. Excited to have Morgan here. We're going to talk about Podcast 101, basically how to do podcast advertising from a tactical level, and then we're going to reach into the strategy sense to see what that entails for us as well. Ultimately, we just want to make sure that we get this point across. It doesn't have to be very complicated to run a podcast advertising campaign. We've done it many, many times, and we're eager to share some secrets with you. With that being said, Morgan, would love to get a quick intro from you.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Morgan. So I've got over a decade of experience working in marketing with startups and D2C brands, everything from Society6, Modern Fertility, Row, Surrey, and have really focused on scaling digital and offline channels, including podcast, influencer, affiliate. Many, if you name it, I've probably tried to make it work or seen it fail, but most recently partnering with the RSU team on podcasting, and it's such an exciting channel. I'm stoked to be here chatting with you guys.
Amazing, thank you. And I'm Grant Durando. I'm a director of the offline marketing practice at Right Side Up. Right Side Up, we basically place fractional or full-time consultants into specialized areas of marketing in order to solve marketing challenges for brands. My business unit specifically handles podcast advertising, as well as terrestrial radio, satellite radio, streaming audio, and YouTube endorsement. So eager to chat with you guys about that as well. Let's get into it. So podcast advertising in the US, once a niche channel, now covers about 58% of the US population on a monthly basis. It's kind of mass media. Is that something that you've seen reflected in your career trajectory over the last 10 years, that growth?
Yeah, definitely. I think when I was at Modern Fertility, I came in and they were actually getting ready to shut down the podcast channel because it was only generating about 20 sales a month. And then I partnered with RSU, working really closely. We were able to bring that from about 20 to 200 sales a month, just seeing there's so much opportunity in this space. I think if you really have the right structure and the right creative, and you can go after the right testing structure, then you can see incredible growth. And it actually became one of our second largest channel when we were acquired by Row. So it's like there's so much opportunity there, and I think I've seen it over the last 10 years. More and more brands are excited about it and bringing it on as part of their channel mix. So it's like, I feel like if you haven't done it, you've got to do it. And if you are doing it and you're not sure maybe why it's not working, then maybe it's time to kind of think outside of the box, because it's likely some other levers maybe you can pull on.
Yeah, and I think that's really been reflected in what we used to think of just like, podcasts is, male comedians talking to a male audience, maybe 35 plus. Modern Fertility is a great example of that, of a female exclusive product that was able to really thrive and scale in that space. At Right Side Up, we have over 55 brands at any given time working with us on podcast advertising, and we run the gamut from fintech servicing enterprise-style businesses to the $10, $20 toothbrushes, right? That look really good on your countertops. And a lot of those campaigns work extremely well for a performance brand, performance metrics. So really exciting. One of my favorite stats about podcast advertising that I always look for in the annual reports is the number of episodes that an average audience member listens to. So this is a bit wonky, but basically, if you're a weekly podcast listener in the US, you on average listen to 8 podcasts a week, right? So what does that tell us? It means podcast listeners are extremely engaged in the channel and getting that kind of cross-resonance frequency from multiple hosts. This kind of leads us into the bread and butter of podcast advertising, which is host-read advertisements. I'm sure if you guys are interested in this space, you know what I'm talking about. It's the content that's running, and oh, hold on, we just need to do a quick ad read. Would love to tell you about Surrey toothbrushes, right? 10% off with promo code Grant. That's not real. How do you see that figure, that 8 episodes per week, reflected in advertising campaigns in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we see, like Modern Fertility, go back to them, is that we really focused on those female host, and oftentimes we did see a lot of overlap in the shows that they were listening to, and you're really increasing your frequency when they're hearing, the host of like the comedy show that they really love, and then they kind of switch over, they're listening to kind of their mom podcast, and then maybe they've got like a cooking one or something, and all of those people are talking about their unique experience with the product. It's so powerful. Like, somebody that you listen to every day that's actually like a real person that's really trying the product, that can speak to a personal experience. Like, it's really hard to create that with digital or like on Facebook. Like, yes, we have our influencer marketing, but I don't know, hearing somebody talk about like maybe their own personal struggle with fertility and how the product helped them, it's just like, it's incredible to kind of see the impact of all of those different hosts in different areas working together, and that's when I think you really start to build momentum before, for a channel that's going to be a powerhouse for your brand.
Yeah, and I think it stands in really nice contrast with kind of social media feeds and even paid search to an extent. For social media and influencer programs, there's a time and a place for that. You seed product, you have them talk about it on their feeds with their stories or on their TikTok. But it's ultimately 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and you're really vying for time in this really hyper environment. With podcast advertising, you already have a listener who's, you're literally in their head, right? If they're listening to headphones. And they're in this slower, more focused, more present environment. And we see that reflected in conversion rates. So, I've worked with brands who have had kind of a micro-influencer strategy where they just like bomb out 2,000, influencers with product and then hope it works on Instagram. And then at the same time, in parallel, they send product to 15 podcast hosts, have them try it, work with us to write great creative and measure it right. And, the podcast advertising channel actually works better in that instance, which I think there's something to it, especially with the host-read endorsement element. So really interesting. Let's talk about working in international brands. How would you think about marketing in the US if you're a UK or EU based company?
That's available in the US?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm assuming. I think it can be intimidating a little bit to make that crossover. Like, you have a structure that's really working in your country or in Europe, and going into the US, it's a big market. There's a lot of competition. But I think it's almost like an exciting opportunity, and I think being a brand that is from Europe has some kind of like sexy appeal to Americans, right? It's like, you always want to be the person that goes to your friend and is like, oh, have you heard about this cool like European brand, whatever, and then all of a sudden that starts building momentum. So I would say like, I think hosts are really excited to work with new brands. Like, I wouldn't think like, marketing is global now. I don't think you need to be intimidated by moving into a new US market. I think like moving into any market, there are challenges, but I would approach it like any of your other channels. Like, if you made it work in the UK, you can make it work in the States if you have the right structure in place, if you're willing to put the budget there, you're willing to test smart. Like, I think that's the biggest thing, is you really need to have your testing strategy in place so that you aren't just burning cash, right? So like, being thoughtful about the approach, but I'd say just like, stop waiting, go for it. I think you'll be surprised at the traction that you get and the excitement from the hosts that you're partnering with, and from just the overall response. And if nothing else, like, you're gonna get really great learnings that you can take back and say, okay, how can we pivot, edit on this, and like then slowly increase your budget based on those learnings, right? I think what happens with a lot of brands is they go over to the US, they're like, we're gonna spend $1 million, and it's like, great, like, how are you going to track those learnings? Like, how are you approaching it? More money doesn't mean more success. So I think just like being really thoughtful, and oftentimes starting smaller with a few I think targeted campaigns can lead then to those like $1 million campaign spends, because you have more confidence about what you're doing in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the US, even though it's a massive podcast advertising market, it really doesn't take a lot of spend, relatively speaking, to break in. It's not a 250, 500K channel. We do tests all the time for as little as, 20K per month over 3 months, just to give you some concrete data. So that's one way to test it. I think also too, what's exciting is as podcasts have grown as a media channel, you can also do tests in the UK. You can do tests in Europe, and we do that as well. So they're smaller markets. You're going to have, the hyper-localized language and lexicon there. But that is an opportunity to kind of test the waters if you're not ready to, cross the pond.
One thing I'll say too, Grant, is I think just like a lot of times you do the spend to do the podcasting, and then you don't have the landing page experience, you don't have the rest of the funnel tightened up. So I think that's one thing to always be thoughtful of, is like if you're going into the US, you got to make sure that the experience is really seamless, because that's their expectation, is like they're going to go to your website, it needs to be a clean flow, it needs to be really thought out, like it needs to feel like what they heard from the host is what they're experiencing on the site. I think oftentimes people are like, oh, podcasts don't work. And it's like, was it the podcast or was it your site experience that's lacking? So just like before you spend there, I think as a marketer, you have to be really thoughtful about the entire experience and make sure that it's really tight, because a show could work really well if you just like make some site tweaks and have the experience buttoned up.
Yeah, I think that's right. And we always screen for kind of like product market fit, essentially,
Totally.
and make sure that, Meta is working for you in the US and paid search is working for you in the US, et cetera. Because if you're not iterating on Meta yet, podcast advertising probably isn't where you should be, right? You should be using those core digital channels for what they are, which is really good proxies for product market fit.
Totally,
right?
yep.
Let's talk about measurement. So, I've been doing this for 12 years. 12 years ago is kind of like promo codes, vanity URLs, and how did you hear about us surveys, little high school algebra and a little bit of trust. And
boop, boop.
that's how we scaled, some of the earliest podcast programs. Where are we now?
Yeah, so I think this is one thing that's really exciting about podcast advertising right now, is that the pixel tracking is really strong, right? Like it is reliable. Even five years ago, like we had it, but could you rely on the numbers when you looked at kind of what was happening on the back end? It didn't quite back out, but now I think brands can have a lot of faith in the numbers they're seeing from like a Podscribe or a Magellan. I think it's gotten really, really sophisticated. So I think a lot of brands shied away from podcasts because it was a little bit squishy. Like, can we rely on these numbers? I don't know how accurate these are. Now you can go into Podscribe and you can really see like the hard data and match it up with what you're seeing in the back end of your site and say like, okay, this does back out, this does make sense, and have a lot of faith in the numbers you're seeing, as opposed to saying, oh, we're just going to throw a 2x multiplier on that. Like it also allows you to dive into, hey, did this deliver the number of impressions that they said they were going to? Because that's money you can get back. You can go back to the network and say, hey, you only delivered 50%, like we're only going to pay 50%, right? So that helps those CACs comes down with efficiencies there. And also you can see the host read. It'll say like, hey, we only rate this host read a 5 out of 10. They didn't do all of these things. So it helps you to say like, hey, I need to flag these 5 shows. I need to reach out to them right now and say, these are really bad reads. Like we need to make good. We need new reads. Like we need more impression guarantees. So I think it just like gives you the tools to like fight for every dollar and make sure that it's being spent efficiently. And like, I guess it's just with pixel tracking, there's honestly like no reason not to jump in, because you have all of this data to help back you up. Like you're not going to go into the marketing meeting and be like, I think it's kind of working. You can say like, hey, here's a chart that I pulled from Podscribe to show you like the hard facts. And I think as marketers, like that's always makes us feel really good when we're presenting to like CEOs or CMOs. Like
yeah, and I think that's like the key to algorithmic advertising in general, right?
Yeah.
Is that user level, IP driven in most cases attribution, where you can walk into your performance meeting every week and say like, yes, I know that this user heard these 3 podcast ads, then converted here, and then now that we're a week and a half past that date, has an LTV of 35 pounds or whatever it might be. So I think that's really, really a key unlock.
Yeah.
And of course, re-rating based on delivery. It kind of creates almost a deliverability metric, right? Or a viewability metric, so that you're not paying for podcast advertisements that are, below the fold or basically going unheard. So that's a hot topic for us. We're always trying to, figure out what a verified impression is, but very awesome. Talk to me about AI.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a panel in 2026 without AI. Where does that fit into all of this?
I mean, I think especially for small brands, right? If you are just trying to do podcasts on your own, like you got to be using, whether it's Gemini or Claude, ChatGPT, like it will help you dial in your creative, right? Like how should I be saying this? What should I be saying? What shows you should potentially be targeting? If you have a list of shows that you're kind of interested but you're not sure, you can load those into an AI, and that will tell you like, hey, we would recommend these shows. These are the hosts that you should really target. Here's similar shows that you might want to go after. Like, and it will also help you do the data analysis. So you could take all of the host ad reads that you have, upload them, and say, what am I missing in these host reads? How could we tighten up? What feedback should I be giving? It can also tell you, like, I think we were talking about earlier, right? Like, maybe you've been targeting sports podcasts, but there's so many different types of sports podcasts, right? There are the sports podcasts that are going kind of the play-by-play, what happened in the game. There's the sports podcasts that are kind of more general, more like talk show style. So maybe you're saying, oh, sports works for us, but maybe it's not just sports that work for you. Like maybe it's more like the game replay type sports. So I think you can really drill down and say like, have the AI help you pinpoint and get really into the nitty gritty of like, why does this type of show work? And it saves you so much time. So instead of you having to like, if you have a really small team, I get that. You only have like 3 people on the marketing team. Like you don't have somebody that can spend hours and hours a day diving into that data. Like that's why AI is there. And if you're not using it to help you work smarter, like it's time to start. It can act like, I think, a second person on your team with the hours that you can save, and the insights are really, really incredible.
Yeah, and I think from a service provider point of view, it frees up our team to be more strategic.
Totally.
Get those insights faster, and instead of taking hours to get them in minutes, and then be able to deploy and execute with publisher partners to optimize those campaigns really rapidly.
Yeah.
I think that's really solid. You talk a lot about certain types of sports shows, right?
Yeah.
And we haven't really covered what makes a podcast performance campaign work.
Right.
Now, at Right Side Up, we talk a lot about vertical strategies, thinking about genres. Is that kind of how you think about podcast performance campaigns? Break that down for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of different components, right? Like, if I knew exactly what worked for every brand, I don't know, I would probably be sitting here
doing
at the beach
else.
somewhere.
Yeah.
But I think that it's so many things. It's one, like, it's one, you got to invest in it, right? It's like, do we have the budget to do this? Is everyone on board with this is happening? Do we have the right creative in place? Are we going after the right types of shows? Then do we have the right tracking in place to make sure that after we spend, we're really getting the learnings we need to iterate here? And then I think if you do have a small team and you really want to make podcasts work, like, speaking from somebody who used RSU as a resource and is now working on the RSU side, like having somebody that knows what they're doing to help you get, even if it's for short term, right? Like let's just get the structure in place so we're set up for success, or to train up somebody who's maybe a little bit junior on the team so that they are equipped with what they need to then take it to the next level. Like I think it's like there isn't like a right answer. It's just like, I think so many small decisions that go into kind of forming the campaigns and putting off the right foot. And I really think that like, it's a lot about having the right structure in place early so that when you do find what's working, you could scale really quickly, because maybe you have one person in-house that's doing it and it's kind of working, but going from working with like 5 shows to working with 100 shows, like that's massive scale, and it is so much work to maintain all of those relationships. So I think making sure that you have your T's crossed, I's dotted, and like someone there to help you set yourself up for success is really what's going to like make the difference.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think to help guide the light, between art and science and media strategy. So
Yeah.
If you do see a fantasy football podcast working for you in the U.S., what do you do with that information? Like, does that mean you should go test NHL hockey shows,
Yeah.
or does that mean you should test NFL, or maybe it actually means that you should test reality TV adjacent shows,
Yeah.
because there's data overlap that supports those correlations. I'm not saying that there necessarily is, but I've seen weirder overlaps in my experience, and so it is an art and a science.
I think too, like dropping biases, you make a good point. Like I think
Yes.
a lot of brands are like, it's like for modern fertility, we're like, oh well, it's like it's science and it's like health. We want women that are like interested in health and fertility and all stuff. And actually those shows did not work for us. Like what worked for us was like true crime and reality TV. And so I think that's like a really important thing for every team to remember, is that like you have to just have an open mind. Like try something different. go places you haven't been before. Like, you might find that that's actually what really resonates. Like, it might be K-pop, like I don't know. There's just like, it's hard to know. And I know that we've been working internally with the brand. You think you know these things, and it's kind of just like a good reminder of that, like, we're always learning and we're always iterating, and like there's always a chance to I think be surprised. So podcast is one area of like, let yourself kind of be like surprised and delighted by what you learn, and the only way to do that is kind of like try something new, I think.
Yeah, and I think guess and check is one way to characterize it. I think like using the scientific method and just having a really well organized set of hypotheses that you're testing against for the channel sounds, again, really simple, but it's so important. I think the brands that I see that don't have a lot of success on their own in podcast advertising kind of like let their instincts lead them, honestly, and they do big deals with maybe 5 expensive talents, which make a lot of contextual sense. And then the performance comes back and they're like, wait, I mean, this is like my brand ambassador. I just signed a full year deal with these folks. Why isn't it working? So yeah, exactly. So question your biases. I think that's really important. I think we have some time for a little Q&A. If there are any questions, would love to field those. Anyone? Yes, right up here in the front. And we have a mic coming around for the recording if it's okay. Thank you.
When it comes to monetizing your podcast and working with brands, what is the minimum listenership that you need? Or what would they prefer?
Yeah, I think generally for me and our firm, we look at 10,000 downloads per episode over a 30-day period as kind of a benchmark. That's definitely on the lower end. So if you're kind of like around there, that's probably where I would start. And then going back to the AI thing is, something I've been soapboxing about is if you do have a brand and you're looking to monetize, I think AI opens up a huge opportunity for you to kind of avoid some of those bigger network partnerships, sorry, networks in the room, and basically just like blast out sales emails and just try to sell your podcast, which previously would take a lot of work, and now you can kind of automate a lot of that process, but 10,000 downloads. Yeah, thanks, good question. Any other questions? Yeah.
I work for a voice agency, so I just wanted to know what the kind of navigation on AI is to human voice, and how you feel about that kind of combative situation right now.
Yeah, good question. You said a voice agency, like a voiceover agency?
Yeah,
okay, perfect. Yeah, Morgan, do you have any thoughts? I have thoughts, but...
Yeah, why don't you kick it off and then I can...
I mean, I think it's an all of the above approach, right? I don't think that AI, just like for my job and my career, is going to come in and do exactly what I can do at like the very capital H human level. I do think that there are instances where I'd rather have AI do parts of my job than the parts that I'm doing currently, right? And I think that's healthy. In the voiceover space particularly, I think that there's really talented folks who make fantastic products. I think that there's probably areas that they feel similar to my sentiment that I just expressed of like, I don't know that you want to be in a room recording, 500 different versions of VO tags for my zip code targeted campaign, right? For, not the incremental dollars of fees that it maybe deserves, So I think that there's time and a place. Places that we're actively using AI for like voice generation is those kinds of instances where it's like, all right, I need hyper-targeted language that we don't have the bandwidth to like, write, produce, be in the studio for, and talent, it would be so prohibitively expensive that marketing campaign wouldn't even be feasible. So I think it's crossing that boundary between marketing campaigns that are really good ideas but unfeasible with human talent. Those are now possible. And so we're now spending more money instead of taking from one to go to the other. I don't know if that reflects your experience and thought.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't think that AI is going to replace. I think it's just more allowing brands to do more and spend in other areas. But I think actually for a Spotify campaign, once we tried to use AI voices, and we just found it is a bit hard to like. I think too, like you're iterating, you're like, oh, we could just like have a human that we could talk to that would understand the brand, they could just say it. And so I think it's just very much a use case. I don't think that AI is going to be replacing those voice actors anytime soon, but there's time and a place.
Yeah, good question. I think we're good. So thank you guys so much for joining. Hope you learned something. If you need to find us after. Thank you.